how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. Sorry I missed the last 2 weeks. I got sick with this respiratory cold that's been going around. Yeah, so I was sick for since right before Christmas, and then I lost my voice for 4 days. It was a whole thing. But now I've learned to record videos ahead of time just in case, so I'm gonna be doing that. Get back on track. But today we're going to talk about Percy Jackson, the new one that is on Disney Plus. I have seen the movies, so I'm kind of already spoiled about some of the things that's going to happen, but I know this is closer to the book, which I haven't read any of the books, so we'll kind of see. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with the general premise that is on IMDb, which says, demigod Percy Jackson leads a quest across America to prevent a war among the Olympian gods. Spoilers, you know what I mean? We haven't even started. But again, I have seen the movie, so as I was prepared to watch this, I was like, all right, I'm going in with I don't know if expectations is exactly the word, but I'm kind of I already know the general idea of what's supposed to happen. So I was interested more in how is this different than what is actually happening. But if it is your first time here, I go beat by beat through the plot. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't miss anything. So we start with the voiceover with Percy. He is standing in the rain, and he's basically just being all of this stuff is real. I'm different. You never know what's going to happen. But once they find you, your life will change forever. And you're like, what are you talking about? And then it hits the title screen. We get another voiceover. Again, I've said this before in other episodes. Don't know why voiceovers are such a big thing now. But we get a voiceover. It turns out that Percy says he is a troubled kid. You see a teacher going to find him. They find him on the roof. He saw something. He saw a Pegasus, but then suddenly he didn't see it anymore. And this happened back in second grade. It turns out that after that, Percy got a therapist, and they're like, hey, this is all your imagination. Don't let it run wild. We see another moment of Percy seeing a metal rhino walking down the street. Next thing he knows, it turns into a garbage truck. Some kids walk by and they're like, what a loser. So Percy has some issues, not really popular at school. He eventually meets this new kid, Grover. They become best friends. They are hanging out, they're talking, but Grover also gets bullied, so neither of them are really, top of the school food chain. We then cut to Percy. He is older now. They go on a trip to a museum. He's looking down at his paper and all the letters are shifting around. So clearly something's going on. We get a flashback and it turns out that Percy is named after the hero Perseus. And he's like, oh, is it because he was, this great hero that fought monsters? And then we get this interesting moment where the mom's like, well, how do you know that he's a hero? And how do you know the being that he was fighting is necessarily a monster? You never really know who people are. And it's oh, okay, it's interesting that she's already setting up this idea of hey, you shouldn't really judge a book by its cover. You should have kind of an open mind. And he's setting that at such a young age. Basically, she was saying she called him Perseus because, Perseus was thrown into the sea with his mom. And then his mom was like, listen, you gotta weather the storm. We'll get through this. Don't you worry. And ended up becoming a great hero. So she wants her son to persevere and get through whatever troubles that he's going to have. We cut back and Percy is getting bullied by a girl. One of the teachers, Mrs. Dot, is like, yo, Percy, control yourself. And he's like, are you serious? I'm the one getting bullied here. She's like, I don't want to hear it. And then the other teacher, Mr. Brutner, comes and he's like, all right, leave Percy alone. So it's okay, one teacher clearly doesn't like him. The other one is clearly on his side. Mr. Brutner's like, here, I think you need this. And he gives him a pen. We cut to outside. Percy and Grover are having lunch. You can see that they already have camaraderie. It was established earlier beforehand that they're already friends, but as they're talking, they're switching items on their sandwiches. Oh, all right, you give me your cheese, I'll give you, my deli meat or whatever. So clearly they're cool with each other. Nancy comes over and bullies them again. She throws cheese at Grover and hits him in the face. And Percy's like, nah, I've had enough of this. He stands up and then he uses telekinesis on her and pushes her in the water, which I thought was weird just because of his whole setup. I was like, wait, does he have telekinesis? I don't remember that being his power set, but we'll worry about that later. So he looks down at his pen. His pen starts to shake like it's having a seizure. Mrs. Dots is like, we finally found you, huh? You thought you could hide. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she like transforms into this monster, and like one of her wings hits one of the kids next to her, and the kid looks around like, what the hell is that? So clearly something's going on. She lunges at Percy. He accidentally kills her. She turns to dust, and Percy passes out. When he wakes up, everyone's like, like, is he dead? Like, what the hell happened? He's like, what happened? Where's Mrs. Dots? Grover and Mr. Bruner's like, who the hell is Mrs. Dots? And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, so not only did she turn to a monster, but no one seems to remember her for some reason. We're back at school. We're at the principal's office. Percy and Grover are there. The principal's like, yo, you said you didn't push, Nancy into the pool or, the little fountain or whatever. But she's saying, she was covered in water, and you keep saying, like, you didn't do it. So, like, again, I'm asking you, like, did you do it? And he's like, I didn't put my hands on her, which is clever and also true. So he's like, it wasn't me, or at least I didn't do it. And then Grover's like, no, he said that he wanted to, like, get back at her, and I saw him push her into the pool. And it's, like, conflicting because, again, I know where the story's going, but acting like a new viewer in my head, I was like, Grover, bro, you're my best friend. Or, you're his best friend. Like, what are you snitching on the homie? Like, what are you doing? Like, can't trust this kid. Can't trust him. At least in the moment. Percy essentially gets kicked out. He's waiting for his ride to pick him up from a bench. This is where Mr. Bruner comes over, and he's, like, trying to comfort him. And he's, like, saying cryptic things like, oh, Percy, you're special, and I believe you. Like, tell me what you think happened. And, I've seen some stuff. You know what I mean? Maybe I can, like, help you make sense of stuff or whatever. And Percy's just like, dude, I don't want to hear it. I just got kicked out of school. Like, I just want to go home. And he gets in the car and he heads home. So we get back to Percy's house. He lives in an apartment in New York. The maintenance man, Eddie, comes out after. You can hear him, like, arguing with somebody. When he comes out, he's like, I feel bad for you, Percy, that you have to go in there. And he goes in, and this is where we meet Gabe. He's the I guess boyfriend. He's like annoying, and he's kind of a bum. He's bad at poker, so he's constantly losing whatever money he has. But he acts like he's the man of the house, and Percy's like, dude, my mom pays all the bills. Like, I don't know why you think you're big pimping around here, you know what I mean? And one thing I found interesting about this part, because I was trying not to compare it to the movie, but in the movie, I remember the boyfriend having a vibe of like, and there's no easy way to say this, but he seems almost like he could be abusive. Like, you're like, oh, I don't really like that guy. He seems like he might, put his hands on Percy and his mom. Where this one just seems like, oh, this guy just kind of sucks. So it's kind of weird that Eddie would be like, I'm sorry that you have to go in there. Because it's like, oh, he's annoying, but he's not like terrible. Where the movie version seemed like, no, that guy's a bad dude. So I was like, okay. But we see the mom, and she's like sitting in the rain. And she's like having a moment. But she's cool. She's like, Percy, the principal told me what happened, but I'm on your side. I believe you. She even gives him a gift. And she's like, you know what? We're going to go to our little trip in Montauk and go to that cabin we always go to. And then before they leave, they have that conversation, Gabe and the mom, about the whole sandwich. She's like, we're going to leave. And, maybe if you're a good boy, I'll get you your sandwich. And he's like, I want the peppers on it. And this part was kind of funny because it had the general feeling of almost like a couple that, like, hate each other, but you can tell they kind of care about each other. Like, they argue, but, like, sometimes deep down you're like, oh, they kind of do like each other. So I was like, I'm not really sure what the vibe is here. It's kind of interesting, but I don't think we'll ever get to it for other reasons that we'll eventually get to. We cut to Percy. He's like standing in the rain, just like in the beginning of the episode. And he sees this spirit, a real return to slab type. And it's standing out there, and it's like, oh, you're so weak. What are you going to do? And then suddenly he wakes up, and they're at the cabin. Him and the mom play a little game. They go run inside real quick. Percy eventually wants to talk to his mom. He's basically like, hey, mom, I think I'm really having, like, issues, and I need like, medical help. Like, I need help. Like, things aren't getting any better for me. And she's like, well, what did she say to you? And he goes, wait, what? I never told you about what happened at the museum. And she's like, listen, the reason we come here is because this is where I met your father. and she starts talking about the dad. And then in the beginning, and maybe just because I'm an adult, but she's like, yeah, he was like brave and courageous, and as soon as I met him, he was just like, he was just something different. And I was about to be like, hold on, mom, like, we only need so many details, mom. Let's not get lost in the sauce. Basically, she was like, hey, your dad was a god. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? And she's like, all the stories I told you about the monsters and the gods and all that Greek stuff, it's all real. It's all real. And you are what we call a demigod, or also known as a half-blood. And he's like, that's what the monster called me. And Percy's like, listen, I know you probably think I'm a kid, like you're messing with me. He's like, this isn't funny, like, like you're acting weird and I don't like any of this. But before the mom can really get into it, Grover shows up and he's like, yo, the timetable has moved up, we gotta get out of here. And as he's trying to like talk, Percy's like, yo, Grover, like, Grover. And then he's like, what? And he's like, why does it look like you have a goat in your pants? And he's like, oh, you didn't get to tell him? And the mom's like, I just started talking. Like, I didn't get to do anything. You moved up the timetable. So we find out that Grover is a satyr, and he is, because at this point, we're in the car now. Grover is a satyr, and he is Percy's protector. Everything they've been doing has basically kind of been training. And Grover knew about Miss Dots being a monster, but he could only like half see her in the moment, which is why he didn't intervene. And they need to go to a camp that is safe for half-bloods. And it is at this moment where a couple things I don't like about this is that, one, it feels like everything's moving so fast that Percy doesn't have... okay, hold on, let me back up. Grover is just giving exposition in the car. It's not like a nervous like exposition or like, hey, usually we don't blah blah blah, but I need to like give you all this information now, that way you're not lost. Like, it just feels like he's just throwing everything out there. And the only moment that I feel like we really have Percy be realistic is when he's like, why does it look like there's a goat in your pants? But everything else feels like he's just kind of like, not mellow, but almost kind of like numb. Like he's not really reacting to the fact that like, hey, monsters and gods and all of this is real. Like, I wanted more of like, whoa, what are you guys talking about? Like, no, I don't want to get in the car with you. Like, you need to explain everything. Yada. Like, there wasn't enough reaction from Percy for it to feel like this is a full life-changing experience, learning that all of this stuff is real and that you're half a god. So everything was happening way too fast. And I was like, I wish we could have had a different direction for this and had Percy really sit with the fact of, or just have more emotion of being like, wait, you're saying all of this information? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I wish he just wanted to know more and was just kind of like, this is all too much. But he was just kind of like there. Suddenly a Minotaur shows up. Somehow Percy can see it. It's like the middle of the night and it's pouring down rain, and he's like, is that a Minotaur? And I'm like, my guy, how do you even see that? But this is where Grover was saying that he secretly been training them this whole time by showing him those little magic cards. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm also 24. And it's like, all right, Grover, like, that's weird. A whole adult being with teenagers or like little kids, but whatever. The Minotaur attacks the car. The mom is able to get the car out of the way just in time before they hit a truck, but they still crash the car. They get out and they're like, all right, we got to go to camp. Percy's mom is like, hey, I can't come with you. I'm just a regular human, but I can try to hold off the monster. She's like, give me your jacket. He knows their scent. Maybe if I go in a different direction, the monster will get lost and won't be able to find you. So they head off, and Percy has to turn around because it's his mom. You gotta see what happens. She's obviously no match. The Minotaur picks her up, and she turns to dust. This is where, Grover's like, damn. But Percy's like, oh, hell no. And he pulls out his sword, stands on business, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you ain't gonna kill my mom, lightly. You know what I mean? You're gonna have to take one for the team, or you're gonna have to take one. So Percy fights the Minotaur, and let me say the Minotaur, and it's probably based on some of the VFX videos I've seen, doing things in the nighttime makes things easier to animate. I don't know if that's true, but the Minotaur looked good. Percy does his best to fight it. He hops on its back. There's a part where he when he rips one of its horns out, shoves it in its head, it like turns to dust, and then Percy passes out. And I was like, oh, okay. I kind of like that it wasn't like this big. It wasn't like he suddenly had the ability to fight. It was just like, hey, I know I gotta defend myself somehow. And all he did was really get on its back, and then he like pulled the horn, and it's like, oh, I wonder what the strength level is for demigods for him to just kind of like pull a horn out of its head. But I mean, he took that thing down. Again, he falls to the floor. He passes out. He half wakes up. He hears like people around him, and then you hear Mr. Bruner's voice, and you see the shadow of a centaur. And he's like, well, we don't like, welcome to Camp Half-Blood, Percy Jackson. And then Percy passes out, and we hit the credits. Now, if it is your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It is 1 and done, give it a chance, and I'm in. For this one, I'm going to say I'm in. The reason that I say that I'm in is because, one, I already liked the original movie. So having more of the story, especially closer to, I guess, whatever the book is going to be, because again, I didn't read them. I was like, okay, well, I already liked the original movie, and I watched the second one exist. But I like the world enough to know more of what's going on. But based on this one, I like that Percy actually is a kid. You know, he looks and feels like a kid. Granted, you know, we didn't have the deep experience that I wanted of him actually like freaking out and being like, what is going on? But because this is a TV show and not a movie, we have more episodes for him to hopefully be, you know, kind of lost in what's going on and just being like, yo, you guys need to slow down and really explain things to me. And I'm interested in seeing where the story actually goes, because I don't know if they're going to be loyal to it or if they're going to die. Like I don't know how much of a divergence it is between the original movie and the book. So like I'm expecting the first season to end the way the movie ended. I'm trying to say it without giving any spoilers if you haven't seen, you know, the movie. But I'm expecting certain characters and things to happen. So I'm like anticipating like, oh, is that gonna happen? Are we leading up to that in maybe a later season? Or are they gonna switch things around? Or is there something I don't know? Because again, I didn't read the books. And then having the Minotaur look good means that they put some sort of budget into here. So I'm like, all right, if we're gonna get more monsters, I expect them to look decent. You know what I mean? I'm not expecting like a huge budget, but based on this, I'm expecting the same type of quality. Yeah, I'm just along for the ride, and I kind of like the world as it is. So I was like, all right, you know, this is a solid first episode. Definitely want to watch more. And spoilers, I am currently keeping up with the show. So yeah, I'll give it this one an I am in. Like I said, I'm no longer sick. I'm going to pre-record some episodes. That way I don't have to worry about it just in case anything happens. So I will see you guys next Tuesday. Again, if you want to follow me or keep up with what's going on with the podcast, you can follow me on Twitter, or X as they call it, at Little Leafers. So little Leafers. And until next time, peace.